Bienvenido. If you are able, please share this show with a friend. Leave us a nice review on the podcast player of your choice, or if you'd like to support us financially, sign up for the companion podcast, The St. Nicholas Project, on Gum Road. All these things really help us out. Namaste.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Once upon a time, 3 soldiers trudged down the road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had eaten nothing for 2 days and had not slept in a bed in weeks. "How I would like a good dinner tonight," said the first. "Ooh, and a bed to sleep in," said the second. "But all that is impossible," said the third. "Must march on." On they marched. Suddenly ahead of them they saw the lights of a village. "Maybe we'll find a bite to eat there," said the first. "And a loft to sleep in," said the second. "No harm in asking," said the third. But the peasants of that place feared strangers, and when they heard 3 soldiers were coming, they talked among themselves. "We barely have enough to eat for our own. They will take everything we have." So, together the peasants conspired and pushed the sacks of barley under the haylofts, lowered buckets of milk down the wells. They put quilts over the carrot bins, hid cabbages and potatoes under the bed. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all they had to eat. The soldiers stopped at the first house of Paul and François. "Good evening to you," they said. "Could you spare a bite of food for 3 hungry soldiers?" "We've had no food for ourselves in 3 days," said Paul. "It's been a poor harvest." They went to the next house of Albert and Louise. "Could you spare a bit of food and have you a corner we might spend the night?" "Oh no," said Albert. "We gave all we could spare to the soldiers who came before ye." "Our beds are full," said Louise. And on it went like this, all around the village. They were too sick. They had not enough. They had to keep poor family members. No one could spare a bite. So the 3 soldiers talked together. "Very well," they said. "Since there's no food to eat here, we'll have to make stone soup." The peasants stared. "Stone soup? That would be something to know about." "First, we'll need a large pot and water to cook it in, and then 3 smooth, round stones." This was quickly brought, peasants watching in awe as the soldiers put the stones into the pot and set it to boil. "Stones like these make for excellent soup," said the first soldiers. "But no soup is complete without salt and pepper." Some children ran to fetch salt and pepper that they had hid. "Stones like these generally make very good soup," the soldiers continued. "But oh, it would be better if there were carrots. Much better. But no use in asking for what you can't have." "Why, I think I have a carrot or 2, said Françoise. And she ran off and came back with an apron full of carrots. "Oh, but if only we had a bit of beef and a few potatoes, now this soup would be good enough for a rich man's table." The peasants thought that over. They remembered their potatoes and sides of beef hanging in the cellars and ran to fetch them. Rich man's soup. All from a few stones. It seemed like magic. Ah, sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and potatoes. Now, if only we had a little barley and a cup of milk, this soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined with us. Peasants looked at one another. The soldiers had entertained the king well. But no use asking for what you don't have, the soldiers sighed. But soon enough the peasants found barley from their lofts, and they brought milk from the wells, and the soldiers stirred the barley and milk into the steaming broths while the peasants watched. At last the soup was ready. All of you shall taste, the soldiers said, but first a table must be set. Great tables were placed in the square, and all around were lighted torches, and everyone ate their fill, and had never had such a soup. And afterwards, they sang and danced, and all of it from 3 simple stones. At last they were tired, and the 3 soldiers were given the best beds in the village. The bed of the priest, the bed of the baker, and even the bed of the mayor's house. In the morning the whole village gathered to send them off. Thanks for what you have taught us, the peasant said. We shall never go hungry now that we know how to make soup from stones. Oh, it's all in the knowing how, said the soldiers. Off they went down the road. I have an idea for a new t-shirt.
Sweet. Lay it on me.
It's going to be called, so here, it's the silhouette
Yeah.
of a little person.
A little person.
Like a person with dwarfism.
Okay.
You know, like what they used to call, before we were enlightened, they used to call them midgets.
I remember those days back in the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back when they had 50 midgets on TV, harnessed together with ropes, trying to pull a jumbo jet faster than a single African elephant.
I didn't see that, but it sounds awesome.
The greatest piece of TV that was ever produced. But okay, so the t-shirt has a silhouette of a midget on it. Or I'm sorry, a little person.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, a hobbit, whatever they want to be called now.
Okay.
And he has a bottle and he's like wobbly, like he's drunk.
Yep.
And then it says underneath it, being a little person is the same thing as being an alcoholic. And then underneath that it has open parentheses, it is, close parentheses.
I don't get it.
That would be a great t-shirt. Well, I just think it would be a great t-shirt.
So
Because, yeah, go ahead.
there's nothing to get.
Well, it has to do with a recent promotion by the U.S. Navy. Have you seen?
No? What are you talking about, man?
Well, okay, first of all, I should say, I'm not 100% sure that the story of Stone Soup will be relevant. I think that it will.
Okay.
Have you heard the story of Stone Soup before, Stone Soup?
Well, as a child, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Classic.
Everyone heard it as a child. I think there are 2 stories, like parables, that really explain much of quote-unquote civilized society and how it operates. And the first, and perhaps, I don't know which is most important, but of the 2, the first is the Emperor's New Clothes,
Yeah.
and the second one is Stone Soup. Emperor's New Clothes is sort of self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've almost figured out Stone Soup, but not quite.
Yeah.
We're going to figure it out together, I hope.
Sweet.
But, so that may be of relevance. We're also going to discuss the sort of occult history of daylight savings time. But first, I want to talk about the Navy.
Yeah.
Because the Navy recently had some photos up, or not photos, posters, banners, what would you call them, around their bases.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how the heading on the banner, right?
Okay.
It says, "Do you know your disability?" Ellipsis, ... In italics, yet. Right? Do you know your disability? Yet. Right? ...
Like you're all. It
You
just
are
assumes.
disabled.
Yeah, it assumes
You
you're
just
all
don't-
disabled.
Now, I will say that if you are in the Navy, probably so, right?
I mean, fair.
Because that's where everyone. You just joined the Navy because you're closeted and want to have gay sex on submarines. I think is why. I mean, that's what the village people said.
Yeah, it's true. That's
I
what
think
they said.
that is the main goal of the Navy.
Could be.
It has always been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to be a certain sort of person to want to be on a steel boat for months.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so of all the military branches most likely to be disabled, physically or mentally, I would think it would be the Navy.
Yeah.
Does anyone disagree with that?
No, we don't. No, we were with you, Sumo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the Marines, which I guess are technically in the Navy, even though they hate to.
Well, they're the men's department.
Right. I think that they are not. I think they're probably the least disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Although all of the military is becoming disabled. Then maybe the Army after that, maybe, and then the Air Force after that.
Chair
Pilots
Force
are very much not disabled because you can't be, but everyone supporting the pilots can be disabled.
Right.
And then the Navy, and then the most disabled is the Coast Guard. Because who even knows what they do?
They do.
Right?
They do drug interdiction. That's pretty cool.
They have those little motorized rafts.
Yeah.
And they float around. And but yeah, the I kid, of course. I love the Navy. Not that I have any reason to or any connection to the Navy. I just like boats.
I mean, who doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know your disability yet? And then it says under that, the subheading is, if you do, please self-identify. So there's no diagnosis necessary.
Yeah, you just tell them.
You just say that you have the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then by updating, it has bullet points of why you need to do this. It says, by updating your disability status, you will assist us with 1, understanding the potential and current needs for employees with disabilities. 2, proactively addressing issues that may impact people with disabilities. And 3, accurately reporting our progress to meet the Department of the Navy's 2% participation rate of people with targeted disabilities, which is really the whole point. The number 3rd one is the real thing.
Right. It's always the last reason is always the real one.
The last reason is always, that's a great metric, yes. The last reason is, the first ones are fluff, and the last one is because the Navy has a target to get disabled people in there because they feel like, I don't know what they feel like. They feel like more wheelchairs makes us more war ready or something. And so they have a quota now to like where they need 2% of the Navy needs to be people that are disabled.
Yeah.
And then, so you have that, but then the people that actually staff the thing, they don't really want to do that. That's a big hassle. So they just figured, what if we just reclassify our current staff as disabled? And they go, yeah, that's great, which is what everyone is doing across all the spheres. They're like, well, what if you need a certain amount of women? And then Microsoft looks around and says, look at all their coders and says, listen, we all know that women can't code. Right? They all look around and say, so Bill, can you please grow your hair long and wear a skirt? We will call you a woman and meet this quota, and there will be a huge bonus in it for you.
Yep.
And that's what's really happening, is that this is just it's all this. This is why you can self-identify as things. This is what colleges have done now, because you can just self-identify your race. And so all the white kids are like, yeah, I'm Latino. You speak Spanish? No. You have any Spanish? No.
Doesn't matter.
And you just self-identify.
Yeah.
And so on this list, they have this like, not really a grid, but like this smash word of various disabilities that you can identify as.
Okay.
One of them is AIDS, right? The other, which is, I don't know if that's more of a disease.
It's going to be like half the Navy.
Yeah, right. That's like half the, as discussed earlier.
Quota met.
Quota met, right? It's in the Navy. Bum, 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 ba-dum. So AIDS, history of alcoholism. Again,
yeah.
If we're going to let alcoholics call themselves disabled.
Right.
That, I don't know. Bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Traumatic brain injury. That one seems legitimate.
Yeah.
Speech impairment. Okay. I mean, not a huge one. I mean, if you're just talking about lisps. Or
kind
something.
of a low rent, but all right.
Yeah, it's a low. I mean, for most of it. Gastrointestinal disorders. Okay. PTSD. Sure. Kidney disease. Yeah, it seems like if you have kidney, you should just not be in the Navy, though.
Yeah.
Or cardiovascular disease. vision problems. That's like everybody.
Right.
I mean, what percentage of the U.S. needs glasses?
I know, right?
That's like everyone. Morbid obesity, same, again. Most of America.
That used to be a discharge, didn't it? Like back in the days when
Yeah,
the world
now
made
it's
sense?
like, no, we need the morbid obese blind people. That's what the Navy needs.
Wait,
It's gonna help us.
according to the military, morbid obesity is a disability that they're counting to meet a quota?
Yeah.
You know how bad we're going to get wrecked in the next war?
Pretty bad. Pretty bad. And then, let me look up what this is. Something called, this is specifically SPA War, which I think is the new thing of NAVWAR, which is the Naval Information Warfare Systems Command, is the specific thing that we're talking about here, where this poster appears.
Okay.
But anyway, stroke, again, a legitimate issue, but also maybe one you shouldn't be continuing in military service if you have.
Right, yeah.
Like if you have an issue of like recurring strokes,
maybe
you
not
should probably
war material.
be discharged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like not like seated at the table that shoots the missiles.
Yeah, maybe not.
Like listen, Sally has strokes. Where should she be?
I think
on the nuclear sub.
Yeah, I think strokes.
She should be
really,
driving the nuclear submarine.
It's really going to impair your ability to push the launch button.
Right.
Like if you can't extend your arm or finger.
The same with epilepsy, which you now can have, and the Navy wants that.
That just makes you push the button at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah.
I love this one. Complete paralysis. Total. What? If you're totally.
Is this real?
Paralyzed.
Is this real?
Yes.
I was with you until complete paralysis.
I know. No, this is a real banner that is in the. Are you completely paralyzed? Like, then you need to be in the Navy. Do you need? Used to, we thought that being in the military, you should like one of the tests should be you should do a certain number of push-ups. But then we realized that actually being totally immobile was the path. That was Sun Tzu. Because the greatest way to win the war is to never fight it.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what that is. Cancer, again, I don't know. A lot of these seem like what we used to call diseases and not really disability. I mean, there's always been like a distinction, but theirs is like blurring them. And then they have arthritis, asthma, ADD.
Oh, come on. ADD's not real. Gosh.
Intellectual disability, which I guess that just means you're stupid.
Well, there's plenty of that.
Yeah. And you can self-identify as any of these. And then little people. I really like the
It says
people.
little people? It doesn't say like
Yeah.
dwarfism or something?
No, it says little people. And I like this one because, first of all, the idea that you can self-identify as a little person is fantastic. I self-identify.
I mean, technically I'm a manlet, so does that count?
Yeah, I
Little person?
self-identify as a midget with dwarfism.
Yeah.
And the Navy's like, fine, that's okay. And then they put you in a classroom to help you and the other dwarves.
Uh-huh.
And
so you get
go there,
segregated?
you're a regular sized person, and they all look at you funny. And then you point to your long beard, the fact that you're carrying an axe. You're like, look, I'm also a dwarf.
If I were about 4 inches shorter, that would be just a natural life path for me, is grow a long beard with braids and carry an axe.
Yeah, and this is advice to little people. I think you should stop trying to be normal and just dwarf max.
Lean into it.
Like, become a Lord of the Rings character.
Yeah.
How many other people can do that? People don't have naturally pointy ears and be very slender. That's not a disease. Actually, it is a disease, but it's much less rare. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I know a kid that has this. It's called Elf's disease.
Really?
It's a real thing. And that the existence of Elf's disease and dwarfism makes me sometimes wonder if they're genetic holdovers from a time when those things lived and have interbred with us. I don't know.
You should talk to some of our listeners are Lord of the Rings is history people.
Yeah, the elf, I forget what it's called. Commonly it's called like elfism.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually it's like the opposite of Down syndrome. Weirdly. It's like if you took, instead of extra chromosomes, you had those you have those removed or something. It's the
opposite of autism? So are you like really good with literature analysis or something? I don't get it.
No, it makes your features very slender and like hawkish.
Okay.
And it's a little bit like Marfan syndrome-y, but it also, you have very like, sometimes the ears get a little pointy.
Sweet.
It's weird. I know one kid that has this.
Okay.
And it's a weird thing.
I had no idea this was a thing. It's wild.
Yeah. I think that maybe in the past there were just communities of people with lived.
And they called them the dwarves?
Yeah. And the same with elves.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I thought because this poster makes it sound like that being a little person is on the same plane as being an alcoholic.
I don't think. Yeah. Okay. I see.
So that's where I got the idea for this shirt. It would be like, being a little person is the same thing being an alcoholic, according to the Navy. I thought that would be good for everyone if we just...
That'd be a pretty cool shirt. I'll talk to the graphics department.
I think that we need to make this shirt, and I think that our listeners need to wear it.
Although the graphics department just talked to me today and said that they don't have time to work on our projects. So we may have to replace the graphics department.
We have a graphics department?
Well, we did, but she's too busy to work on our projects.
Oh. Because the only graphics department I know of is the artist I pay pesos to in Mexico to make a Bigfoot shirt.
Well, he may be back in the rotation.
Yeah,
I tried to get some American help, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm too busy being overeducated."
I know. This is the thing that I discovered also, is the reason that people outsource everything is because the Mexicans do it for really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And because your own listeners don't subscribe to anything to make you be able to afford stuff.
Right.
So what you do is you find a guy that measures things in pesos, and then he'll do great work for you for nickels on the dollar.
Yep.
Which is great. And so maybe I'll call Manuel up again.
Okay, let's talk to Manuel. I got a few ideas too.
But he's pretty like he's sort of Mexican progressive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he would make a shirt with a drunk midget on it.
I mean, for enough pesos, anybody will make it.
He would it for enough pesos, yeah, but I might have to pay him like an American.
Okay.
And that defeats the point.
Well, we tried to pay an American, but
if I have to use
too busy.
real money, then why do Mexicans even exist?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's the point here? This is why God made Mexicans. But anyway, okay, I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to tell my second story before we get into this stuff.
All right.
What is the key machine of the industrial age, the modern age? What makes alienation and the atomization of the modern age possible more than any other machine?
Computer.
No, I can see how you would say that, but
automobile.
I don't think that's the right. No, also a good guess.
Injection molding equipment.
No, that's not a good guess. It is
the combine.
No, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it is the clock.
Oh, okay.
Clock itself, which is why we're going to talk about daylight savings time later, and also maybe discuss stone soup. Although I haven't quite figured out stone soup yet, but maybe our listeners can help. Yesterday, I discovered in my neighborhood, an abandoned neighborhood.
You found a neighborhood in your neighborhood.
Yes. Which I passed by every day, but it had like a cloaking device on it of like not noticeability.
Okay.
And I didn't know, no one else knew it was there either. It was strange. Like, it was like, it was just this road that no one ever went down, sort of cut off from all the main roads. And everyone just ignored it. But the other day I was driving around, saw this road, right? And I asked someone who lived next door, what is this? What's this road? Right? Because we were out doing Boy Scout stuff. We were collecting food, Boy Scout food drive. Okay. And I was walking, so that gave me an opportunity to walk on this part of the neighborhood I normally just drove through. And walking at a different pace, you notice different things. And so I was like, what's that road? Right? And I noticed there were no houses on it. And the guy that lived there goes, oh, that's the old abandoned neighborhood. And I was like, huh? What do you mean? He said, oh, yeah, there's like all these empty lots down there. And if you go in there, it's like all fenced off. And there's this graveyard and stuff.
What?
And I was like, interesting.
Cool,
so of course,
man.
I had to check this out.
Yeah, dude.
After we did the cans, food drive. And I learned after some investigation. So imagine this neighborhood of suburb of houses, right? Mm-hmm. Houses everywhere, house. And then one of the houses is not a house, but a small church-shaped building. Okay?
Okay.
And there's that one. And he goes, you see that church there? He says, people say that they own those lots, but they don't do anything with them. And I said, what kind of church is it? He goes, I don't know. No one knows. No one's ever there. Ah, interesting. So then I look on the Google Maps, right? Mm-hmm. And I notice that the area beside me, that is the abandoned neighborhood, has been blued out to look like it is a lake.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, it's blued out. I've never seen that before. Make it look like there's a little lake there.
What?
And when I look over it in Google Maps, like I always thought, like, oh yeah, there's a little, but then it's like that's not a lake. That's just some That's just
How do I get Google to make my house a lake?
Exactly. And then I look, and you know how Google Maps makes the little squares, little rectangles for the shapes of houses?
Yeah.
The little church, all of them have that except for that little church. The little church has an empty lot space, even though there's a church there. And it's, by looking at it, older than all of the buildings around it.
This is weird, dog.
I know. I was starting to get very intrigued. I was like, I'm on the case of a mystery. So I drive up that little road, and as I go, I start to see signs that say area under 24-hour surveillance. And things are like roped off, no trespassing, private property. And they're very hastily made, you know?
Okay.
And I'm going, all right, I found a cult.
I was just thinking you found a cult, man.
I was like, awesome. This is great.
Yeah, dude.
I found some people that live right next to me this whole time, and they've been running a secret cult, somehow getting their entire information scrubbed from Google. Love it. Right? And so I drive a little, and my son's in the car with me, and he's freaked out. Going, Dad, let's go back. And so we drive down this little thing, and it starts to get a little more foresty. And then we come to basically what I would describe as a fence the size where it's approaching a medieval battlement.
Whoa.
Like a wooden fence, maybe 12 foot tall. And it's encircling something. And there's an opening big enough for the car to drive through. Now, it's not fenced off, right? But there is a sign saying that there are cameras watching you all the time. Even though I looked around, I didn't see any cameras.
Okay.
So that's either a ruse or they're very well hidden. And so then I drove through it. And when I drove through it, it came upon this circle, like a road circle, where it looped around.
Okay.
And inside this 12-foot tall wooden fence. And then I look in the middle, and I see that there is, in fact, a graveyard encircled by this road. In the middle of suburbia here.
Ooh.
Right, like a 12-foot tall fenced-off graveyard.
Okay.
And then I get out and I look, and the graves The most recent ones are from the 1970s. I think there's maybe one from the 1980s.
Okay.
But they are all hand scratched.
Oh, man.
Like, right.
What?
Like someone took a chisel and a hammer and just like pounded out the name of the person and the day they died.
Are you kidding me
as though
with
you
this?
or I would do. Right? And then I'm thinking, well, this is getting interesting.
Dude.
So I drive around more, and then I look at all I can look at, and I think, well, this is...
So are there houses in this area?
No.
There's not.
But there are, not in this abandoned neighborhood, but like if you look through the trees, you can see other houses. And that's the weird thing is that I would estimate there's probably 7 to, not including the ground where people are dead on,
mm-hmm.
but the other ground, there's probably about 7 lot-sized pieces of land.
Okay.
In a pretty upscale neighborhood
mm-hmm.
that I would wager you could sell each one for at least $200,000 or something more. So if this church has it,
mm-hmm.
they're sitting on $1 million to $2 million.
Does the church have services, or is it just a building?
Here, I'm gonna get. So the guy told me, he said no one's ever there.
Okay.
So I'm driving out. I leave the fortification, back down the road through what Google thinks is a lake. I'm driving my car, and then I'm driving past that little church, and I look, and there's a guy mowing the grass. This guy probably knows. Stop the car. Son's like, Dad, don't do this. Stop. What are you? Talk to the weird man. I get out and I flag him down. And he's this black man.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a name that belongs to a Nintendo character.
Okay.
Not the one you maybe first think of, but maybe like a common Nintendo character, much like I do,
mm-hmm.
being Yoshi. Something like that.
I always go straight to Link.
It could be any of those.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, this man cuts off his mower when I wave to him. And I say, "Sir, do you know what kind of church this is?" Takes off his gloves that he's been mowing with. Slaps his legs with his glove. Character out of an...
What? Like in a threatening way or in a cheerful hee-haw
like in a
sort
cheerful
of way?
way, like,
okay.
gee howdy.
Okay.
And he goes, "I sure do, son. This is a church that worships Jesus Christ." Oh, here we go. And he approaches me, and he is the exact archetype of he's like the distillation of every rogue, non-denominational Southern black preacher.
Yep.
Who, like, every third sentence raises his hand and goes, "Amen."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm just going, "Amen." And we talked for a long time. He tells me he has a radio show. He tells me he's been running this church for like 40, 50 years.
Wow.
He says, "We meet every Sunday at 1. Sometimes I'm the only one here." Right?
Okay.
And I said, "Oh, okay." So but see, here's the thing, like, if he's a cult leader,
you got to have members in a cult, like.
well, right, but then I was thinking maybe he did, and that's what the graves are from. Like, I don't know. It's a very weird situation. He invited me to go. I think I'm going to go because I haven't been in a cult in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think you have to.
Okay.
Just to keep current.
Yeah.
But yeah, see, here's the thing. If it is a cult, he's not motivated by money because he could liquidate and get $2 million like almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
If he actually owns that stuff, and I think he does.
Okay. Or
it's related because those graves they had some of the same markings as this building.
You know, there are some churches that run immigration. Well, I call them churches in quotes. Immigration scams where they sponsor people for religious visas into the United States, and they really have no other way of raising money other than hustling people for getting visas.
Could be that. I don't know. Like he said, he gave me a little bit of background. He said, I used to be part of the Methodists. And the Methodists have a thing. I don't know if you're aware of this. The Methodists have like an African American Methodist church.
They're the based ones.
What do they call it? The African American. I think it's just called African American Methodists. Which is basically, in order in the civil rights era to appear more progressive, the Methodists started black churches. Doesn't really sound progressive now.
No, it doesn't.
Right. But he told me that he stopped being associated with the Methodists because he said I had a sign up that said African American Methodist, and I looked at it one day and I said, "That's racist."
This guy's all right.
And he ripped it down.
Yeah, man.
And then he said, "So I don't know what's going on with him. I have to follow up and see if he is a legit guy or if he's a cult leader or what. Maybe I'll join his cult and just see how it goes, and I'll be killed and put in that hand scratch graveyard. I don't know.
Please don't do anything that's going to get you killed."
Well, we'll see. I make no promises, but I am deeply curious about this man whose church doesn't show up on Google and who thinks the graveyard is a lake, who has this fortified cemetery.
Yeah, how did he hide his property from Google? That's pretty wild.
I think you can ask to have your property like blurred out on Google Street View, I think, in a lot of countries.
Right, but if you put a lake on it, I mean, dude's got some pull with somebody.
Yeah, it's I don't know, and he gave me his number and told me to call him.
Okay.
And I sent him a text message.
Now he's got your number.
I was like, hello, Diddy Kong. I am interested in listening to your radio show. Please send me. He never got back to me.
Okay.
Which makes me, I don't know, I'm somewhat suspicious.
Maybe it's a landline he gave you.
Well, it says red, though. It says, like, it's sent through now, it says delivered or read.
I don't know what that means.
So, we know how you send a text message and it'll say it was read, like the person saw it.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. So, Diddy Kong has seen my message and doesn't. I don't know. I need advice from the listeners on how to approach what to do here. And when I got back in the car, my son said, "Dad, that guy was a little..." I said, "Yeah, he's just enthusiastic," because he was very talkative.
Yeah.
He was full of like witticisms. You know, like he would say things like, some people say you need a big congregation to be a minister, but I say my ministry is wherever my feet is.
Well, your feet are in a lake, according to Google.
It's like my feet are in a lake cemetery. Yeah. But, so I don't know. I may have stumbled upon a secret cult in my neighborhood I never knew.
Awesome.
Or maybe he's just a guy running his own denomination who's very enthusiastic about it.
You should just swing by on a Sunday and see what's up.
Yeah, I should. I don't want to know what the weird fortified graveyard abandoned lots thing is about.
Yeah, just don't end up in the graveyard. Maybe pack heat.
Maybe what? Pack heat?
Pack heat. Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, in case things go south.
Maybe. I recently got my grandfather's truck. Do some work in.
Yep.
And it has his old like single shotgun in there.
Sweet.
Which is, the kind where you have to break it and you put one shell in.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Which he used to use for shooting snakes around the farm.
Yeah.
But it is like the exterior of it is completely rusted. And the barrel and the stock are held on by electrical tape. So I'm not sure it's the best offensive weapon, but maybe.
I mean, it may explode if you use it.
Well, I think my dad has used it within the last year.
Okay.
So, I don't know. We will see. We will see. But yes. Daylight savings time. Are you for or against?
Against.
A lot of people are against now. What is your reasoning against. Because
it's unnatural.
I'm sort of, yeah, I also feel this way.
I'm an organism. I'm not a machine that you can just derail onto a different set of tracks and expect me to be cool with it.
Yes.
I live in harmony with nature.
That should be an organism. That should be a t-shirt too. I'm an organism! !
Not a mechanism.
And then it also just has a little drunk midget on it.
Yeah, let's just put drunk midgets on everything.
That could be our mascot. Yeah. A drunk midget. Well, yeah, you're in touch with nature because we had to do the show at a different time because you were again slaughtering chickens.
I was, correct? Again.
Now, how often do you have to slaughter chickens?
We do it about twice a year.
Do your chickens you have new chickens and they hatch and grow and then you slaughter them?
Well, we don't hatch them. My brother-in-law and I go in together on a whole bunch of chickens, and he does all the hard work on his land. And then once a year or twice a year, I'll go down there and we'll have chicken day. And this year we did 45 chickens. And so we'll just, we have a little assembly line.
These were chickens you grew up from chicks?
Yes. So he'll order the chicks. They're on, it's awesome. They're on grass their whole life. They get primo feed, sunshine, fresh air. You can't buy a chicken this quality for any amount of money. They're so good.
Okay.
And then we slaughter them and process them.
Yeah, you are against daylight savings time because you are more connected to nature.
Yes. And
I feel that this is because the continual refrain over the entire daylight savings saga, which has been a multi-100-year affair, has farmers have been always the chief objectors to daylight savings time. For practical and also perhaps religious reasons.
Religious.
Practical in that what they would say is like, listen, we can't put the thing in the combine until the dew dries, and that just happens when it happens. It doesn't matter what time you call it. Or the cow has to be milked when it has to. It doesn't matter what the time is. This seems weird. What the clock says.
Yeah.
Which is true. And also, especially in America, when they were doing the daylight savings time, there was a big pushback in that people were being like, you are attacking God's time, trying to impose the man's time. Now, what they didn't know was that the time they were calling God's time was also itself fake, and had been fake for years.
Well, of course, yeah.
But their heart was in the right place. So, daylight savings time, a lot of this is coming. I'm going to talk today from a book called Seize the Daylight. The curious and contentious story of daylight savings time. Very interesting book.
Weird.
But, yeah. But who came up with daylight savings time first? Everyone knows this.
FDR.
No. Before that.
I don't know, man.
I'll give you a hint. He was almost assuredly a rapist, murderous, cannibal, and a founding father of America.
Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin, the devil himself. That's right. He started this.
That's something he would do.
Evil.
Yeah.
Because he's evil. Right. So, Benjamin Franklin conceived of this. In all of the cantankerous history and annoyance and problems and fights about daylight savings time can be traced to Ben Franklin's maid forgetting to close the curtains.
What?
So, if you think, dear listener, your job is unimportant, consider the consequences to the planet from this lady doing a poor job one night. Because it's arguably this French maid's fault, who he was also probably having sex with.
Undoubtedly.
And that's probably why. So, he wrote in the Journal de Paris when he was 78 years old in the year 1784. Ben Franklin, he was the ambassador to America from to France from America. He was serving as the American minister to France. He wrote these words in the Journal de Paris a night after his maid had forgotten to close the curtains the previous evening. I was surprised to find my room filled with light when I was awoken by a strange and sharp noise. I imagined at first that a number of lamps had been brought into my room, but rubbing my eyes, I perceived the light came in through the windows. Still thinking it was something extraordinary that the sun should rise so early, I checked my watch. It was 6 a.m. I looked into the almanac, where I found it to be the hour given for the sun's rising on that day. Those who with me have never seen any signs of sunshine before noon, and seldom regard the astronomical part of the almanac, will be as astonished as I was when they hear of its rising so early, and especially when I assure them that it gives light as soon as it rises. I am convinced of this. I am certain of my fact. One cannot be more certain of any fact. I saw it with my own eyes, and having repeated this observation the 3 following mornings, I found always precisely the same result. So...
Wait. He was... Surely this was written tongue-in-cheek.
Well, only a little bit. The guy that penned the thing, early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, was a complete sluggard and stayed up till 4 every day. Because that's the time you have to murder prostitutes. Right? You can't
do it in broad daylight
before midnight. Yeah. It just isn't done. If you're going to kill a hooker and stuff her bones under the floorboards of your house to be found 200 years later by archaeologists in America, which did happen, you can't do that in the middle of the day, and you get very tired. If you ever strangled a hooker to death, it makes you exhausted.
I'm sure it's very strenuous.
I mean, it's like killing a chicken, but much bigger.
Yeah.
Right? And louder. And so, that's what he was always asleep very late. And he was, like everything else in Franklin's life, a giant fraud and phony, where he was just a hypocrite and would say one thing in his witticisms of his almanacs and then never lived that way ever. Just like he pretended that he held the kite with the key on it to test lightning, when really he gave it to his nephew to get electrocuted.
Monster.
He just watched. Which is true of all of the founding fathers of America almost completely. like George Washington, the guy that kills people on Christmas and has a love affair with Alexander Hamilton at Valley Forge. Which is true.
What?
Into it. Because Alexander Hamilton was super, super gay.
Oh.
Which is why they made a Broadway play about him. George Washington never had sex with his wife because he was also gay. We talk about this in his private life. But anyway, in any case, all the founding fathers of America were degenerate. Franklin's discovery led to several serious and important reflections on his part. He realized that if he'd gotten up at his noon as usual, he would have slept through 6 hours of sun. In exchange, he would have been up 6 additional hours that evening by candle. And since candlelight was much more expensive than sunlight, Franklin's love of efficiency and economy induced him to use a little arithmetic to calculate how much the city of Paris could save using sunshine instead of candles. And he did this. He said for the 6 months, between March 20th and September 20th, Franklin estimated that on average, Parisians would sleep 7 hours after sunrise, which was probably not a terrible estimate. Maybe a little assuming there were... I mean, look, we all know French people are lazy.
But did people just stay up late all the time back then? I mean, was this a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I keep trying to impress this on people, and people never quite believe me that you today, listener, probably work more than almost anyone in history.
Yeah, I do believe that is true. Yeah.
That's true. People used to do whatever. Because until this is why I said the clock earlier, until standardized timekeeping, being punctual didn't really mean anything. Because time was just whatever it was. It was just like, well, the sun's up now, and now it's not. And that was about the extent of your timekeeping.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people would just sleep when they were sleepy and get up whenever their body said, okay, we've slept enough. Right? Even in like the Industrial Revolution, do you know what time most people got to work? 10 o'clock.
What?
10 o'clock. Even all the horror stories about how awful it was, some of that's true, but 10 o'clock was the average starting time for your factories, for banks, for all this stuff. Because people just slept in. it's just what they did. People, it wasn't like people. I would bet that some of our listeners get up at like 5 or 6 some days.
Oh, I guarantee it. Man, I'm just thinking like even within our lifetime or a little before that Aretha Franklin song, working 9 to 5. People don't work 9 to 5. They work 8 to 5.
Or 8 to 6 or more.
Yeah.
And my argument is that this all has to do from the increasing standardization of timekeeping, which is devil's work. But, yeah, in the Industrial Revolution, almost assuredly, a lot of our listeners get up at 5 or 6 in the morning. I have sometimes.
Yeah.
That was completely unheard of. No one ever did that until like 1993. People just used to be asleep. In fact, people used to sleep so much. Like in the Middle Ages, you know they had first and second sleep.
Now I've heard this. This sounds great.
Yeah, here's how much they used to sleep. So you would go to sleep, and then you would need to take a break from sleeping because you slept so much.
Yeah.
And people would get up, like they go to sleep at like say 9, and they get up at like 3 in the morning and just mill around.
Mm-hmm.
They'd even go outside and talk to their neighbors. And so between like 3 and 5 in the morning in like London or Frankfurt, Germany, in the Middle Ages, if you were to go out, people would just be out there with little lanterns. This is why they had nightcaps. Like those little cat, because you needed a hat to match your pajamas because you were going outside. And no gentleman can be seen outside without his hat. Right? That's exactly what it was for. So you'd have to go out, you need a pajama cap, and everyone would just talk, and they would hang out, and then you go back to sleep because you were sleeping so much, right? And people were very well rested. In fact, medical journals at the time, well, they weren't really journals, they were more like medical books, recommended that couples have sex in the break of sleep because this would produce healthier babies somehow.
Yeah, sounds legit.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. But people used to sleep and not work nearly as much. Like a medieval peasant had about half the year off, half the calendar days on a year, with no work.
You know,
at all.
My friends give me grief about like my fantasies about being a subsistence farmer and how much work it'll be. And I tell them, you don't understand. The subsistence farming they only work like 4 hours a day.
Yeah, they do. It's crazy.
Except on like there's a few big days, like big harvest days, whatever. You got to work all day, but most of the time, it's like 4 hours max.
Yeah, and this is what most medieval people did: is they worked even on the days they would work. An 8-hour day was a long one.
Yeah.
But they would have half the year off. A lot of it mandated by the church. You could not work, and people that employed you could not ask you to work on those days.
Yeah.
I mean, you had every Sunday off, no work at all. And then you had all these feast and festival days. And then you had the dead of winter, which you couldn't do work outside for anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people, there were field laborers, would do winter jobs. Like they would work in the fields in the summer. In the winter, they would have some trade, like making tiles or making bricks or something, right? But even so, you didn't make things to put on the shelves for the future. Like, if you compare a cobbler in medieval times to, say, Nike, a Nike factory today, Nike just makes a bunch of shoes, puts them on the shelf, and hopes people buy them.
Yep.
Cobblers back then would only make shoes when someone commissioned them to make a shoe.
Right.
They would come in and say, I need a shoe. And they'd say, okay, I'm not doing anything today. I will make you a shoe. And if no one came in, they made no shoes. You didn't make shoes because one, you made a shoe to fit each individual foot, and you would like measure it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't just make a bunch of different sizes. And then, two, you just sort of match the working patterns of the farmers around you, which is they worked like 5 hours a day, and you would too, and that would be about it. Right? Now, that said, they were working. They were doing other things. Like there was work to do, like washing clothes, cooking meals,
domestic stuff,
right?
Yeah,
domestic stuff, which took a lot of time. But like the thing that they were employed at, like a farmer or a blacksmith, was only about 4 or 5 hours a day. And honestly, that's about as much as you really could do. Because live your life without electricity for a day or two and see that things take you longer.
Yeah,
to do. You know, and so doing a lot of your domestic activities and stuff that was not quote unquote work just took longer. It took more of your day, and so you didn't really have that much time. But yeah, people used to, and even as they were transitioning to the Industrial Revolution, it took a long time to condition the populace to like get up at 5 and think that was normal. People used to just sleep, and that's what most animals do. Yeah. Most animals sleep a lot. You know, it's a very natural thing to sleep, and that's what human beings want to do. This is why kids in college sleep all the time.
Yeah.
This is why stoners sleep all the time.
And
that's the
you can
natural
read a million articles about how modern people are so sleep deprived, but yet nobody's reducing their work hours.
Yeah, if anything, they're going the opposite way.
Right.
And the thing about, people say you need 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours of sleep. That's nothing. That comes from nothing. Mm-hmm. There's no science behind that. It's just literally all that is when they started doing shifts in factories, you had an 8-hour shift. And then people came up with the idea of like, well, you have an 8-hour shift, 8 hours of other things, 8 hours sleep. And that's all it comes from is the same shift at the factory. Like you need a sleep shift.
Yeah.
There's no science behind that. People would usually sleep, if given nothing else to do, a lot of people would sleep about 12 or 13 hours a day.
Oh, I could sleep 12 hours every night. Easy.
Yeah. And that's really what your body wants to do, and I think that's probably the source of not only obesity, a lot of, because at night your body's repairing a lot of damages, it is rejuvenating your cells, it's removing toxins that have accumulated, it is processing fat, it's doing all these things to keep you healthy, and then you're cutting it short every night. Mm-hmm. That's one reason, and I think that also the lack of sleep is inducing a lot of mental disorders that the Navy wants to make into badges of honor. I think because lack of sleep. If people were more well rested, I guarantee you anxiety disorders would drop dramatically.
What if people start getting brass in the military and lapel based on their disabilities instead of their?
I think we're 3 years away from that.
You're probably right.
But yeah, people just used to sleep, and you probably should sleep. You'd be healthier if you went to bed and then just woke up when your body was like, okay, it's time to get up, you would be a healthier person. Mentally, physically, you'd be less stressed. Your relationships would probably be better. But the clocks that we've made don't allow it. They demand you get up. Right? And this is why some people think that they are neo-reactionaries because they're racist or because they want the reintroduction of the papal states. Mm-hmm. And I always go, you're so modern. You have to get rid of the clock. You have to destroy the clock if you really want to achieve anything. Do you understand? So Franklin came up with this idea, and he's from 6 months, from March 20th to September 20th, he estimated, and again, this was probably not a bad estimate, that Parisians slept 7 hours after sunrise and therefore could save 7 hours of candlelight if they rose with the sun. Thus, he computed number of nights from March 20th to September 20th, 183. Hours each night where candles are burned, 7. Total hours, 183 times 7, 1,281. Families in Paris, 100,000. Total hours in Paris by candlelight, 128,100,000. Total weight of candles consumed at half a pound of wax and tallow per hour, 64,050,000 pounds. Total cost is 96,075,000, whatever the weird French currency name is at the time, which was about 200 million in today's money. So he's saying that if you just got up earlier and didn't waste so much candlelight at night being awake, you would save $200 million a year, the city of Paris, just from that in candles. Right?
Okay.
And so all of this is born out of his desire to make things more efficient.
So why not just have everybody wake up earlier instead of changing the time around?
Well, this has been a continual objection all throughout the history of daylight savings time. It makes sense. But Franklin's argument was that people cannot do things on their own. he said they're going to be lazy layabouts like I am after we strangle hookers at night, and then we need something to get us up early that's more official.
So Franklin was the original technocrat.
Yes, he was. And I think there's this... I think people don't believe me about the past where people didn't work as much because grandparents are universally good at making their lives seem more difficult than they were. Grandparents are great at like laying on a guilt trip, like, and I was your age.
Yep.
I walked 15 miles through the snow. And maybe some of that was true if you grew up in the Great Depression. Right?
Yeah.
But other than that, historically, it has not been so. But we will do the same to our grandchildren.
Also, the Great Depression wasn't that bad for most people. Just
exactly
different. That's another conversation. But
yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, but in point of fact, today, like I said, you work more today than probably anyone in history. This is because of machines, globalization, aided in large part by clocks and all the weird artificial machinations of the clocks, like daylight savings time and other things. Discuss. Okay, so, moreover, Franklin said, you may observe that I have calculated upon only one half of the year, and much may be saved in the other, though the days are shorter. Besides, the immense stock of wax and tallow left unconsumed during the summer will probably make candles much cheaper for the ensuing winter. And that little offhand comment is why we only do it half the year or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, it's... None of daylight savings time makes any sense. This is why it's hard to talk about, because people are like, well, then you're like, but that doesn't do anything, right? Because you're just changing as like when people were first rolling out daylight savings time in Britain, the journal Nature mocked it and said, a bunch of scientists said, do you just want us to should we just change the numbers on the thermometer? If it's too cold, we'll just start, instead of calling it 32 degrees, we'll call it 50.
That's great.
Right? That's all you're doing.
Yeah, it's such a valid criticism. Yeah.
But undeterred by people's objections, this is pressed on. This idea that he had there can be traced back to earlier in 1757. He was walking through London and he had the same thing. He said, in the summer when the days are long and walking through the Strand and Flint Street, one morning at 7 o'clock, I observed there was not one shop open, though it had been daylight and the sun above for 3 hours. The inhabitants of London choosing voluntarily to live much by candlelight, sleep by sunshine, and yet often complain, a little absurdly, of the duty on candles and the high price of tallow. So again, in the morning in London in the 1700s, places were just closed. Mm-hmm. People were not awake.
Yep.
They were just asleep. And again, I think that most of our problems, really, when you get down to it, come to a weird, unhealthy relationship with work. Like this idea that basing your entire life around your job is insane and extremely modern.
Yes.
Right? And it causes a lot of problems. But anyway, Franklin made up this four-pronged economical project, he called it, that he presented to France and also to America that fortunately did not take hold immediately. It had to be someone else he laid the groundwork for Satan and then someone else had to come to it. Here was Franklin's plan, lest you doubt how evil he was. 1. Let a tax be laid on every window that is provided with shutters.
What? You mean
people
for
shouldn't be
blocking
able to keep
the
light
sunlight?
out. They should have to wake up. 2. That no family be permitted to be supplied with more than 1 pound of candles per week. 3. Let guards be posted to stop all coaches in the street after sunset. 4. Every morning as soon as the sun rises, let the bells in every church be set ringing, and if that is not sufficient, let cannons be fired in every street to wake the sluggards effectively. So, that's who Ben Franklin was. And all the founding fathers of America were as psychotic when you dig into their real history. You're not waking up in time. We fire cannons. Anyway, Franklin was an early idea that the government should exist to make people more efficient workers and beat the laziness out of them, which is sort of what we still believe, if you think.
Yeah.
Like, it's a hyper focus on efficiency.
Right.
Like the worship of the GDP.
Yep.
Line go up. Line go up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's, as long as the line goes up, all is well.
Doesn't matter what it costs us. Yeah.
Right. So, daylight savings time, what is it ostensibly for? Okay, so the basic goal is to change the hours of human activity to make the best use of daylight, they say. Right? Rather than waking everyone up early, however, as Franklin proposed, daylight savings time shifts the official clock time to provide an extra daylight in the early evening, in exchange for less daylight in the early morning. Spring forward, fall back. Of course, daylight savings time doesn't actually provide any more daylight because you can't make the sun shine any more than it does. It just moves the clocks to make it so that when people get up to go to work, there's more daylight, because we feel that obeying the clock is more important than listening to the sun. We made a machine, the clock, and we're like, well, the clock we have to get up at the 7 every day.
Yep.
Like with the sun's like, well, just change when the 7 is. Well, it's psychotic. It's a psychotic thing. The entire thing only makes sense in the most threadbare of ways because it's an artifice slapped on top of another artificial construct. Universal timekeeping, which is silly, doesn't make sense, and is actually completely like universal timekeeping. When you stop and look at it, is bananas. Right? Okay. My real political goal is the abolishment of clocks.
Awesome.
That's the purpose.
Vote cast for sumo.
Yeah, vote cast for me. So, okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by the idea that clocks are wrong. So maybe I'll talk about him, but the guy that actually got daylight savings time into motion legally was a guy named William Willett, who was a house builder in England.
Okay.
And he, for much the same reasons as Benjamin Franklin before him, wanted daylight savings time. But his proposal was scorned for its artificiality, as you did. Rightly so.
Yep.
And then Churchill, also an evil, terrible person, by the way, who just got a bunch of people killed for no good reason. Pretended, right? He went to Parliament and he said, listen, Willett is not proposing to change from natural time to artificial time, but only to substitute a more convenient artificial time for an inconvenient artificial.
Okay.
Which was somewhat true.
Yeah, okay.
Which was somewhat true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because daylight savings time is the third artificial adjustment. I would actually say the fourth. The third artificial adjustment to natural sun time. First, there was mean time. Then there was standard time. And finally, daylight savings time. Each modification taking us further away from nature and locking us in the bowels of hell. Right? So, there was this arose because there used to be the 69-minute hour. Right? Because from the beginning of history, people have tried to measure the passage of time during the day. And what they would do, naturally, is they would mark the sun's progress across the sky from horizon to horizon. And that was their timepiece.
Okay.
And at some point, they realized that the changing lengths of shadows could be used to measure the movement of the sun. So they put a big obelisk or a sundial down in the middle of the town square, and then make all sorts of fancy markings on the ground to tell you where the shadow was. And that was how they would measure the advance of the sun and mark the time.
Okay.
So the time when the obelisk shadow was shortest divided the daytime into two periods, before noon and afternoon, which we still use, somewhere around 12. Okay, and the earliest systems for dividing the day used simple partitions. The Sumerians split the day into 12 periods they called Dana, each consisting of 30 guests, was mirroring their division of the year into 12 30-day months. The Egyptians divided into 2 sets of 12 equal units, daylight period having 12 hours, nighttime period having 12 hours. The duration of daylight and darkness varies from day to day, however, resulting from the tilt of the Earth about its axis with respect to the sun, and consequently, ancient cultures like Egypt, daytime and nighttime hours would fluctuate in length throughout the year. Because of this, they were called temporal hours. This is where the word temporal comes from, meaning unequal or temporary. Okay.
Interesting.
It is. And it also applies to music and the general attack on what is real. A summer day would have 12 long temporal hours of a day and 12 short temporal hours of a night. And the reverse would be true. Winter, the summer and winter solstices having the biggest deviations between the length of nighttime and daytime hours. In fact, the summer solstice in Thebes, the capital of ancient Egypt, a daytime temporal hour was 69 minutes and a nighttime hour 51 minutes, a proportion which was approximately reversed in the winter solstice. And only at the equinoxes were all 24 temporal hours 60 minutes long. So the first actual manipulation of the clock was to decide to do equal temperament, temporary hours, which is the same thing they do in music to get it off just tonality. Equal temperament was they said, we're going to make all the hours of the day the same duration regardless of the actual time of the sun, regardless of the season.
Yeah.
That is the same thing that was done in music with the octaves. Because if you actually use just tonality, which is dividing the ratios between the notes into whole integers, in many cases it sounds more pure and it sounds more clean.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that just tonality music actually has more healing properties, like at least psychological, like it makes you feel better.
Okay.
But the same problem we had with hours of the day is that if you do that, as you progress from octave to octave, you don't quite get an exact, like right now, the way we have it set up in equal temperament, C5 is double the frequency of C4.
Okay.
But if you do that in just tonality, it's not quite. They call this chromatic drift. And as you go up the octaves, the drift becomes noticeable. And so if you're playing over a longer range of octaves and you tune it to just tonality, like you have a piano has 8 octaves, do that, you begin to notice a bit of disharmony. Just like with the calendar. If you begin to look at it over the long scale of the whole year, you begin to notice that this doesn't quite fit into our neat category of 12 hours. Right? And so what they did is they artificially made the hours of the day the same length, and they artificially made the spaces between the notes the same length.
Okay.
Same ratio.
Yep.
It's the same process. And just like how equal temperament produces music which can be played over in a more unified way over a longer span of octaves, it results in less complexity, less possibility, and less purity of sound.
Interesting.
Same is true, I would argue, for time. The same is true. And also, there was mean time, and there's also mean tonality. And everything that they've done to music, they've also done to time. And I can't help but notice that is not quite a coincidence. Okay, so the temporal hours shortening, the hours being different lengths throughout the day, was not at the equator. The hours are 24 hours; they're the same length all year long. But as you get further away from the equator, it becomes very noticeable. Like in the Roman Empire, during the summer solstice in the Colosseum, it had 12 76-minute daytime hours and 12 44-minute nighttime hours.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's interesting to me that they went to all this trouble of having it
Right.
adjust like this. Yeah.
Well, because they were trying to match at the beginning. They were trying to match the sun.
Right.
They
Yeah,
were
I
trying
understand.
to,
I guess I
know-
understand. Like they're trying to be in harmony with the created order.
Right. And then someone decided this is too complicated. Let's just try and make the created order match our table.
Yeah.
And we can blame the Muslims for that. Because an astronomer named Abul Hassan was the first one to decide, listen, we're going to make the 24-hour day, all the hours equal length, and this was called common time, common usage. So by the time the farmers in America are arguing for God's time versus daylight savings time, they're already arguing for a completely messed up clock.
Right.
They just don't know it. Right. So the machine, you see, in some ways I view the principal struggle of I don't know, the spirit as a struggle between the organic and the artificial, or the living and the machine. The machine is regular and not organic. And the whole reason people standardize the hour at the same 60 minutes every hour was because when they started making mechanical clocks, it was too complicated to have the length of the hours shift like they normally did when you used a sundial.
Yeah.
They could only really do one time. So they said, well, let's just do it like they do at the equinoxes all the time. And so what you had is the machine is regular and dumb and doesn't really make adjustments like organic life does and like nature does. And so when you adjust time, you adjust your rhythm of your life to the machine and its limitations, it makes you yourself more artificial.
I feel that
That's
so
my
deeply.
thesis. I know.
Man.
Because you're dancing to the rhythm of the machine. Boom. Boom. And the rhythm of the machine is like this. Bum, 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 bum. But the rhythm of life is more like bum, it's very flowy. It has a lot more beats. Because just like in just tonality, there's actually an infinite number of ratios between the notes that you can get to.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is it's very hard to notate.
Yeah.
Very hard to notate. But that enables all kinds of possibilities, which is the same way it exists with organic time. But people don't like that because we like to write everything down and try to control it. And so you have to screw with music. You have to screw with time to make everything nice and even and regular. Right? Which is that's the lack of faith. Because you're saying, I don't trust the universe, I don't trust God, I don't trust the cosmos. I need to make it conform to something I can understand. And yes, trees grow in cool shapes and Fibonacci sequences and stuff. That's too hard for me. Everything needs to be a straight line and a square.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. And that's why everyone is unhappy and they feel weird. And because their biology doesn't match the way they're being asked to live. And so that's I've always viewed it as like it's this battle between the organic and the machine, which is really a battle of like faith against not faith. And like, is it because it's the problem of calculus, and I like Isaac Newton, fine. He's okay, right? I enjoy that he spent most of his time. He only spent like a year working on calculus, and the rest of his time was an insane scree about trying to calculate the apocalypse from the Book of Revelations. Mm-hmm. Love that about the guy.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I also like Leibniz, who also invented calculus at the same time. Not like Newton to map the movements of the planets, but to calculate how much beer was in a keg. Why he invented it. Because he felt that people were overcharging him for his beer. He said, is there really that much? How do you know how much is in there? It's not a regular shape. Because you can calculate the volume of a cylinder,
yeah,
but a keg has a bulge in it.
Right.
How are you doing that, buddy? He's like, well, so that's why he invented calculus. And what calculus is the same trying to apply a regularity onto an irregular world. Because what it is, if you're unfamiliar with calculus, you have like shapes that are irregular, like you have a graph, and you want to know the area under the graph. Well, what's the area under a square graph? That's easy. It's base times height. What's the area under one with a bunch of humps and valleys on it? Nobody knows. So just divide it up into infinitely little small rectangles and add those all together. And that's all calculus is. Because you don't know how to do the sum with an irregular object. So what you do is you basically apply a logistical net over the world that makes everything into little squares like a net has. Mm-hmm. And it captures, the net captures it all, and then you say, now we're just add the net up, the squares up. And that's good for a lot of purposes. It has a lot of valid uses, but you miss all the finer details that fall through the net, and life becomes very square-shaped and regular. And it's actually not, but that's the only things you can see, and you've let draw through it all the richness and complexity of life has fallen through it. This is why this desire to regularize things is why there are increasingly infinitesimal particles. Because this is a little bit of a tangent maybe, but I think it's related. They used to think that the atom means the uncuttable. It was the thing you couldn't cut anymore with a knife.
Yeah. And
then they were like, well, if we just make a better knife, we can get smaller. And then they were like, well, if we just make a atom smasher, we can get smaller. And so they thought, oh yeah, we reached the atom. That's the end of it. Da 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 da. And then like, oh no, if we make a more complex machine that can cut sharper, we can cut it even more. And then they got to the electron and they're like, oh, this is it. That's the end. Great. Ah, crap. There's more tiny stuff. And now you're down to, and the truth of the matter is that the smallness of the universe depends on the sharpness of the machine with which you can cut it in half. Just like the bigness of the universe depends on the powerfulness of your telescope.
Mm-hmm.
Because the universe has to run away from you so you can never get to the bottom of it. Because this sounds a little new agey, bear with me, but it's also true. When you're doing this, the universe through you is trying to look at itself. And it's like, what happens when you try to see the back of your own head? Well, it turns away from you. Right? You can't do it. And so when you're trying to look at what is this thing that you really are here? What's going on here? What is this space and time? And you zoom in on it, it's basically like the cosmos trying to say what am I really? And then it always just runs away. And that's why physics is like it is. And that's why it's so, and no one gets that. Which is why they keep building CERN particles and CERN accelerators to smash things apart. And look at things, and they never get anywhere. They just say, oh, it's just smaller stuff still.
Yeah.
Smaller stuff. And there's no bottom. It's an infinite thing. It's infinite in both directions. It just depends on the instrument you can use to cut. Because we keep trying to apply this net over everything to capture it. And you really should just let it go. But daylight savings time prevents us. It makes everyone crazy. So, where was I? What was I talking about?
As a little aside, I was thinking today about metaphors and what a tragedy it is that we don't, as modern people, have an innate understanding of metaphors based in organic, natural things.
Yeah.
And what are we losing? Say, if you read the Bible with all these parables and metaphors and all this agricultural language and language about body and organism and all sorts of things like that, if your worldview is built out of mechanism thinking rather than organism thinking, you might be able to sort of understand the metaphors, but they're not really going to grab you in the same way if you don't live that way.
Yeah, mechanistic thinking I agree 100% with Tolkien on that. He used to sit on a hill and look at trains and just seethe.
Really?
Trains. And he was right to seethe, because a lot of the reasons we have standardized time across the entire globe is because of railway stations.
Yeah.
When they were going through, because used to, when you would travel, you were slow enough that the differences in time weren't overly noticed.
Mm-hmm.
But once people got the railroads, and you would go from Chicago to, say, Philadelphia, you would get there and you'd be like, my watch is off by 30 minutes. They're like, well, yeah, it's because the sun there. See, the sun time there, because people then were still using local sun time for each city. And people were like, yeah, but the sun there. And so people would, and along the route, people would, it was not unheard of for people to adjust their watch like 20 times. Now, why they needed to do this, I don't know. You could just sit there and get there when you get there.
Right.
But people are autistic, and they feel the need to constantly adjust their stupid watches. So, it became difficult for railroad companies to organize when things were going to arrive. Train schedules, shipping was becoming a problem. So the train companies largely divided the United States into the 4 time zones it has now. Mm-hmm. They are responsible for that. And then after they did that, the whole globe was like, let's just do that over the whole planet. People like Russia then adopted it for their railway system. And then once you had Russia and America, that was 2 big chunks of the world already divided up into time zones anyway. So they were just like, well, let's just extend it around. And that's how you got to the modern time. So Tolkien was 100% right to see that the train, because the train was going to destroy any semblance of local sun time keeping, which really allowed people to sleep till noon. And so the reason you can't sleep till noon is because of Benjamin Franklin, railroad companies, and Winston Churchill.
It's wild. And I don't even really want to sleep till noon. I just want to sleep till the sun comes up and wakes me up. That's all I want.
Or just sleep till your body's ready to get up.
Yeah. If I need to sleep more, yeah.
Which is what a lot of people really want, but they can't. And people are always trying to force themselves to do what is unnatural, which is like, I just got to go to bed earlier. And but the truth of the matter is, human beings are sort of quasi nocturnal animals.
Yeah.
Like if you look at native cultures, people like to stay up.
True.
It's just the natural rhythm of the human being is they sort of spend their day half in the daytime and half asleep, which may be spiritually symbolic, like we're half day creatures, half night creatures. Sort of the duality of man, instead of being like an all day creature or an all night creature. I don't know. But it's just the way people naturally revert to when they have time is they become sort of a halvesy nocturnal, halvesy daytime animal. And people are always trying to fight against this, and it's unsuccessful, and that's why they're just loaded with caffeine all the time.
I was thinking maybe I wouldn't need coffee tomorrow morning if I slept till 9:00.
Yeah, you would. The whole reason people need stimulants, and also antidepressants, I think, anti-anxiety medication, is because their internal biological clock is totally screwed off, which regulates all their hormones and all. It's completely thrown off by these clocks. Makes everyone upset. And public clocks didn't start appearing until like the late 1200s. Like London got their first public clock in 1292, Paris in 1300, and Italy in 1344. And that began because used to people, timekeeping was so local, everyone would just set their own watch to noon when the sun was at their farm.
Cool.
Or whatever. Yeah. But now people were beginning to okay, we'll have a collective time for our city or whatever. Now, interestingly, the first time a clock was actually officially advanced forward by 1 hour had nothing to do with daylight savings time. It was in Switzerland, 1444. And it was the siege of the Swiss city of Basel. And the invading army had hatched a plan with traitors within the city. Basically, there was going to be a simultaneous attack by the outside army with internal conspirators, and they would synchronize their attack at 12 noon. Right?
Okay.
But the watchman of the tower learned the plot just at the last minute, really. Too late to warn everybody, but thinking quickly, he set the hand of the clock ahead 1 hour. The bell struck earlier than it was supposed to. The conspirators attacked before the outside army was there. They were able to recognize who they were, kill them, and they survived.
Awesome.
It's pretty cool. Very smart watchman. To commemorate that, the city of Basel had the town clock remain 1 hour ahead as a tradition to commemorate that for over 300 years. Which is nice.
That is cool.
Yeah. So, before this sort of universal clock system, each place followed its own sun time based on its own local noon. right? But the so-called sun time is already an artifact because it has equally tempered days and hours, right? It's already not real. But as the 18th century started to end, clocks and watches became more accurate, but that actually showed problems that had previously been masked by their inaccuracy, right? Because an accurate clock shows every day is exactly 24 hours. The actual length of each day itself is not the same, right? So sometimes days are a little bit more than 24 hours. Sometimes they're a little bit less, right? I think in mid-February, I think that the actual length of a day can lag behind by as much as 14 minutes from like a full rotation.
Whoa.
Right? And so this was like, well, this can't be. The spin of the Earth is wrong. So what we need to do is just make it not be that.
Yeah.
And we'll just all pretend. And then, you know what else? The length of a year is bad. So we need to have a leap year every 4 years to make the calendar. It's he who controls the calendar controls the world. That's the real thing. The calendar, all socio-economic ideologies flow from the calendar. I think that's true. And we have to really sit down and think about if we owe Gregory and his calendar, we owe him scorn or not for making this thing. Because it causes a lot of problems that would not be there. In fact, what they used to do to keep their local time, well, they would do things like at noon, everyone synchronized. When they first started trying to get everyone to synchronize, this is the march of trying to get everyone marching to the beat. And just like we talked about on the rhythm episode, where we talked about the Wheel of Time and how there's that sound and everyone.
The Urge Towers.
The Urge Tower show. This was the beginning of the Urge Towers. It's get the whole globe marching to this artificial rhythm. Boom, boom. Everyone must conform. Boom, boom. And so what they would do when they were first starting to do this is they'd say, everyone must synchronize their clocks at noon. And so you know, we will ring the bells at noon and you synchronize your watches. Got it? Got it? Good. Because if you've ever used a wind-up watch, have you ever used one?
Yeah.
They're awful.
Yeah, they need a lot of upkeep.
Yeah. You have to constantly set them. Like I used to have one, and what you would do is like you would to like set your watch. You would put a little wrench in, a little screwdriver in there, and begin to turn. You wouldn't turn it, but you would think about turning it real hard. That's how subtle you had to do. Because if you actually turned it, it would be off.
Right.
You just had to like put it in there and like think about it real hard, and that would be like enough. It's very annoying. So everyone would have to, and your clock would get off by the end of the day, and so you have to resynchronize it every day at noon. And so they would ring the bells. But sometimes the bells weren't deemed loud enough, so they did do what Franklin suggested, and they used to fire cannons just in the middle of the day to make everyone set their watches by it. You must conform to the march of the Urge Tower. In fact, they even built Urge Towers. They built these big towers where they would drop a time ball.
What?
Which is a big metal ball that they would push off of a ledge of a tower, and it would shine in the sun as a visual marker, like a flash, and also it would hit a big pan at the bottom and make a big boom. Right? And so time balls were large metal spheres. They dropped them every day from a tower at noon.
This is weird.
And I know. This is how weird this is, and so everyone could mark their calendar, their watches the same. And this is a vestige of this practice is, of course, the ball drop in New York Times Square every New Year's Eve. That's where that comes from. They used to just drop time balls, right? And so then the Industrial Revolution came, and it was not enough. We needed more because factories had to communicate, and we needed to know. Now I'm doing business. I'm in Pittsburgh, and I need to do business with someone. I need to send a telegraph to Chicago, I need to. What if they're closed because it's 5:30 here, but it's 4:49 there? This can't be. It's bad for business. And so they adopted railroad time, which eventually came to be known as standard time, which involves the marking up of the world into time zones. But here's the thing. It wasn't universally, just the railroads did it, right? And the railroads would publish books when you got on the railroad of like, we keep this time, our time is 15 minutes ahead of Chicago or 14 minutes behind Philadelphia or whatever. And so you could make adjustments. Okay. Right? Here's where it really gets trippy. Government declared by fiat daylight savings time doesn't really get into practice until World War I, when the Kaiser does it. And they called it the Kaiser's trick hour. And this was the same logic that Benjamin Franklin used. If we move the clocks forward, we'll maximize worker productivity and minimize fuel consumption in the war industries, and that means we will win. And so everyone was afraid that they would win doing this strategy. So the U.S. government met very contentiously, and Woodrow Wilson vetoed it down a couple of times. Then it came. They met very contentiously, and they voted, yes, we will also do this. And they called it wartime, which is where the phrase wartime originates. A wartime president was a president operating under daylight savings time.
Oh, man.
Isn't that a bit weird? That's why perhaps every president since has been a wartime president.
We have to stop it. Now we really have to stop it.
We really have to stop it. It's because what they did was they made wartime. There were even posters of Uncle Sam marching with a clock put up over American cities. And it says, move your clocks ahead an hour, win the war. This is how insane
this is insane.
Right? It was insane. In fact, arguing about it, they would have there's the same tired thing they always do. They would have medical professionals get up there and say like, oh yes, the extra hour of sunlight will be very good for the public health. And the Surgeon General gets up there and is like, yes, well, if we had the extra hour of health, there'd be less rickets and people they'd have less dropsy and whatever. Because they always just trot people out to say what they make science agree with the politics. My favorite was they got the head of the American Institute for the Blind to get up there and be like, the extra hour of sunlight every day will be good for the blind people. I don't know how that ever made sense.
Man.
But they did, because American politics has always been insane. But yeah, it was wartime. And they had it. And then then after the war was over, the same people that voted for it struck it down. They said, okay, now we stop it. But then eventually, when, frankly, around the same time they started pretending to go to the moon, they instituted it as a permanent fixture in America, which is also when we began being a permanent wartime country. Is that a coincidence? That wartime was instituted when we began going to war all the time? I don't know. Is it some sort of weird occult symbolism spell?
Could be.
Could be. But we must destroy daylight savings time, but we must go further. We must destroy equal-tempered days. We must destroy the length of the calendar. Frankly, the entire Gregorian calendar's got to go. And we can't just go back to the Justinian calendar. The Julian calendar. We have to get rid of all calendars that aren't just the moon and the sun.
Okay.
The moon and the sun and the stars.
Like
that is
harvest.
That's your clock, guys.
The month is harvest. The month is planting. First seed, like in Skyrim. That's where we need to be agricultural timekeeping.
Well, there's this. Have you ever been to the Vatican record-keeping place?
No.
Library. They have some great pieces there. One of my favorites was when they were getting a missionary in the Americas after the Pilgrims landed in the wrong spot and made a war pact with the Wampanoag people.
Okay.
Which is the true story of Thanksgiving. Here's what really happened. The Pilgrims were trying to go to Virginia because there were already settlements in Virginia and had been for hundreds of years. And it was like a nice place. But the Pilgrims, there was a storm. And see, this is people play this up in American history, like in schools, as though the Pilgrims were like the first ones to get here. But they were trying to go to one place that was already established. There was a storm, and they landed in Plymouth and in New England, and they were stuck. And they just had to make the best of it. And the Indians there were the Wampanoag people, and they were sort of predisposed to maybe kill them.
Okay.
But the Pilgrims had with them guns and steel and knew how to make steel. And so the Wampanoag were at war with another tribe of Indians, and they said, "This will be great. We will give you pumpkins if you will teach us to make steel."
Sweet.
And they said, "That sounds great." And that's the real story. And then please sign this treaty with us to help us go kill the other people. The Pilgrims said, "Sure." And that was Thanksgiving, which is the real story behind. I believe the chief's name was Chief Yellowfeather.
Awesome.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I think Chief Yellowfeather of the Wampanoag. But yeah. So we have to destroy the timepieces, the Julian calendar. We have to go all the way back. This is not. I'm not being Ted Kaczynski here and against all machinations.
But I mean, it bears repeating. I am an organism, not a mechanism. I'm feeling that so hard right now. I tell you, just going back to the chicken thing. I woke up with the sun. I worked under the sun. When the sun started going down, we called it a day. Had some beers. We made a whole bunch of food. I didn't go inside barely. It was beautiful. I was in total harmony with nature, even though it was a ton of work. I feel so refreshed today from it.
Yeah, real work should make you refreshed,
and it does. It does. It does.
Yeah, not kill your soul. What we're doing is we're doing fake work for fake reasons under a fake clock for a fake calendar.
Man, preach, dude.
And it's a problem. And so let us go forward, destroying all clocks and being free people. You know, it's like Bagheera said to Mowgli. Or you can go if you can go to the village and worship at a steeple, or you can stay here in the jungle with the free people.
I'm turning off my alarm clock this week. I'm gonna run an experiment.
Yeah, you'll feel better, and don't see some. Actually, this is an interesting point. One of the railroads in America, or maybe it was England, I forget, did not institute the standard time because they said, quite accurately, they said if you have a standardized time across the entire country, it will make punctuality sort of a responsibility.
Mm-hmm. That
seems bad.
Man.
Did that not come true? Where being late is like this huge thing in American culture.
Oh, for me, it's a stress. Like, I get kind of bugged out if I'm running late and, yell at my family and stuff. And really, It shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that way. That's a fault on my part.
Yeah, exactly. Because being late according to what? A stupid machine that's just ticking away mindlessly. It doesn't mean anything. It's the same artificiality as the dollars. It's the same. It's just this giant artifice of society that's used as a psychological control mechanism. And I know that sounds a bit conspiratorial, but that's what it is.
It does kind of work that way.
Yeah, and I don't know. We don't have time to talk about Stone Soup. But you just think about that, listener. Think about that story.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out.
Think deeply.
I was going to call this show, before I took up all the time talking about that savings time, Stone Soup, how magic works and why it's your fault.
Well, we can call it that anyway and just not explain it.
That's true. Or we could just call it being a midget is the same as being an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Parentheses, it is.
I'm envisioning that T-shirt in my mind. I think it's got potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-identifies as a little person with a gastrointestinal disorder and PTSD and AIDS.
Do it. Get benefits.
Targets up here, we just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast and went right over the top of us.